Welcome back to our video series where we explore all the states and provinces of North America and sort out the good, the bad, and the ugly, take into consideration the homesteading context, of course. And today I'm kind of excited to talk about PEI, Prince Edward Island. This is a fairly small geographical area, but it is a unique place in Canada. And, it's way on the eastern seaboard. Very few people live there. And there's no major cities, so there's no real no-go zones here. It's a big flat island. It has a fairly mild climate. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't call it mild. It's Atlantic boreal. So it has a sort of a really pleasant summer that doesn't get really hot. But winter is long and there's tons of snow, 110 inches I think their average is maybe 115 inches. So they get a lot of annual snow. But it's kind of a unique little beautiful place, part of Canada. It's got the microclimate advantage of just being this. It's neat in PEI because you're in a microclimate of being surrounded by all the other islands. And so you're kind of shielded from the more harsher Atlantic weather fronts that, people in Newfoundland here will experience being on the right out in the open Atlantic, but you're kind of sheltered in the Gulf, right? This bay, if you will, and so that creates a unique experience as far as the weather is here. And so you get these summers where it's just nice, it's comfortable, it's not harsh. There's also a nice breeze always blowing in through PEI, which can be nice, but it can also mean that it can be really windy, which can be a drag as well. Some things worth noting about it, just just in the geography sense, is that there's not a ton of rural. There is, but the whole island has been developed, and it's because it's not a mountainous island like, say, the island chains in British Columbia. Vancouver Island to Texada and all those funky little islands. It's just not like that at all here. It's more flat. And so it's a very accessible and easy place to get around. There's not a ton of topography. You zoom in here, it's like you get these little riparian areas where there's water tributaries, that are washing out into the ocean. But they're small. They're really small areas. So, even, when we talk about no-go zones, and we're typically discussing every other place, I think PEI is going to be the big exception to all the places we look at in all the states and provinces. But if you just draw a little circle here, and we normally do it's 50 miles or just under 100 kilometers. Even if we said Cornwall was the place and it was really highly populated, then we'd almost rule out the entire island. But that's not the case, because all these towns in PEI are small. So Charlottetown is the capital city, but even that, compared to any other Canadian province, this is a small town. So there's safety in that. There's also a 15-kilometer bridge that connects PEI to the mainland, which is kind of neat, but could also be seen as a risk, in the sense that if that bridge is ever compromised, you're stuck on this island unless you got your own boat. And so, food for thought there. So you got a mild climate, typical Canadian winter, but more Atlantic, because you will get these huge fronts that can come in and just can hammer you with snow for days on end. And that's not necessarily exclusively Atlantic in Canada. It is a very Canadian experience, but you typically see the really big snow systems in these areas where there's more bodies of water. That's a lake effect, and it's not really a lake effect in here. It's an ocean effect, but it's similar. Body of water creates a flywheel of heat, and that can be of benefit for a lot of the years, but it can also create accumulated precipitation systems that can just hammer you. And so, people in Ohio, parts of Pennsylvania, New York, Ontario, Michigan, people in these areas around the Great Lakes know what those winters are like, when you can just get completely hammered with snow and buried. And so that can certainly happen here in PEI. So it's, part of the experience out there. And so if you're going to live here, you're going to know what to expect. The one thing that's great about PEI right now, in general is fairly cheap real estate. As far as Canada is concerned, I don't know if it's the cheapest place in Canada, but it's close. There's no economy here, and that's the challenge. Is that if you do live here, if you work online or have money coming in that doesn't tie you to PEI, great. I would say market gardening can be challenging even in a place like PEI because there's just not a ton of people that are going to buy the stuff because a lot of people are already farming. Like just look at the amount of concrete there is, say in Charlottetown here, and then how much just farmland is. PEI is basically just peri-urban across the board, except some of these small areas where you've got, especially on this western side of the island, it's a lot less, it's more sparse, right? There's less farmland and more trees. And so we'll look at some of these areas that could be good places to consider. So let's go to my PEI. So good area here between Cornwall and Craphood, and it's kind of just reflecting the rural, where the farmlands break up. The topography gets a bit more dynamic because it's based around rivers and tributaries and stuff. So you get these, little bit more interesting topographically parcels of land. And so you might look at, let's just zoom in here and see if we can find an interesting little homestead. Well, this looks like a feedlot type thing. You might not want to live right next to that. But, you might come up here and say, okay, I got a nice little spread here. Let's just draw this one out. So you got a field. Let's just pretend that it's this. Okay. So you're on a road, but you've got, you're kind of close to the road, but it's a really slow road. PEI in general, you have to just adjust all your standards for what is typical traffic and such. So that's a neat little parcel of land. You've got, a private access, though you are on the road. But again, if it's not a busy road, it's not the end of the world. But you've got trees all around, and you're backed up to what is probably, if there is crown land in PEI, I'm sure there is, that could be it. But you've got a nice field where you can do anything you want, and you got, it'd be better to have a turnaround driveway here. I think I would probably make an improvement like that there, so that you could drive in and turn around. It's so convenient when you're homesteading, when you're building things and unloading materials and delivering or receiving deliveries. Turnaround driveways really make things easy and smooth and fluid. And so that could be a neat little parcel of land. Your neighbor here has got some cool stuff going on. He's got a little atrium style greenhouse there facing south. Some nice fields. So no, you might see something like that, in an area like this where there's a bit more rural. Let's go over to this Montage. My French is terrible now. It's been 15 years away from Montreal. But another similar situation. The advantage to this place over the other one is, we could commute to Charlottetown, so this would be all right too if you needed materials that you could only get there. So these are both good as far as services and populations that might be able to, give you things that you need or buy things you need or things you can buy from them. So both these places have a good mix of that. There's like rural pockets, but then there's, you're close to some towns and things like this. We picked a few others here, but we just didn't find good data on the population. Because if we just picked this based on geography, looking here, yes, beautiful area, almost as private as it gets in PEI, especially if you could imagine just being along in this zone here. What a beautiful little spot. But where do you go to get stuff? Look at this. There's nothing here. These are homesteads, and there was no real population data on this either. That's why we put it as orange. But, you got this little town, O'Leary. But even there, what have you got? What are these buildings? Not much. So, challenges in places like this are the commute times. Is that if you're going to unless you're walking in and it's all there and all ready to go, you got to build it, right? And so that means commuting. And the reality with PEI, I would bet, is for a lot of people, you're going to be commuting to Moncton every now and then, just because even Charlottetown is a small town for Canadian standards. Like, look at that. It's a small town. It's a small suburban town. It's got a neat little downtown here, but this is a small city. There's not a ton of amenities there. And so you would probably often, not, I don't know, who knows how often, but it wouldn't be rare for you to be commuting to Moncton. And so you got to think about that, because that bridge, it was 15 kilometers long. I think it's one of the world's longest bridges. I remember when it was built, it was a big news in Canada. So another part here, sort of northeastern part of the island. This is a neat little spot too, where you got this inner harbor and lots of extra little coastline and stuff, which is neat. You know, finding a property along a river or something like that could be beautiful. But again, like the last place, just not a lot of stuff. Like, where do you go to get stuff? This is a thing that people so often overlook, because when you set up a homestead, it's not all there for you. You got to build stuff. You know, very, very rarely do we see homesteads that are just turnkey. I mean, we do. They're called A properties, you know, in our Homestead Accelerator program that we run. We showcase those properties, but they're expensive. You pay for them too, right? So most people in most situations are going to get a homestead and develop it. So you really do have to think about that commute. And then we got this other place here, Murray River. You know, there's a lot of good spots in PEI. It's just the question you have to ask is, how far do I have to go to get stuff? I mean, same thing here. All these towns, you can just see by the lack of concrete. There's just very little stuff, but you could find all kinds of beautiful properties that are probably backed up to these forest areas. There's not a lot of competition in real estate in PEI, I tell you, because most people are leaving PEI. PEI and the Atlantic provinces in Canada for a very, very long time have been net losers of their population as everybody leaves. And that might be changing. And maybe there's opportunity in that too, right? It just depends on what your context is. But yeah, that's PEI, folks. Hope you enjoyed that, got some value out of it. If you guys like these videos and you want to see more of this kind of stuff, you want to learn kind of what I'm doing here, there's a link to a webinar that you can check out where I take you through a lot of these tools in Google Earth and kind of show you how to do this yourself. Because if you can do this yourself, you can save yourself 90% of the time looking for your homestead by not having to go physically look at every homestead. Because you can find out 90% of the things you need with Google Earth. And then you're always going to have to view a property before you buy it. If you don't do it, that would be silly, especially for homesteading. And so you're always going to have to go. But what if you could eliminate 90% of the trips, because you could figure out 90% of the things you need on a property, understand that with Google Earth, and then make way less trips. So the key to having success with finding the right homestead property is sampling the most amount of properties in the shortest period of time with the least amount of travel, right? It's just basic economics. So yeah, you guys might find that webinar useful for you. So there'll be a link to it in the show notes here. And let me know where you guys want me to go next. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.